Welcome to Stickbaggers YouTube channel. I'm Steve. Today we finally have the Street Glide back up on the lift. Now there's been several requests to do this since we did the Road Glide video, but today we're going to be doing the front air ride on the Street Glide. Now there's not a lot of difference between the Road Glide video that we did and what we're going to do today to the Street Glide, other than how you access the front forks. Now keep in mind, if you have any kind of lowering kit in your front forks right now, that has to go. In order to run air ride, you have to have the stock spring in the top of that fork. So if you have lowering cartridges or like the 1-inch or 2-inch progressive lowering kits, the drop-in shorter springs, that stuff has to go, and you have to get the OEM spring put back in. On the Road Glide, we absolutely had to do that because we had a 1-inch drop in the front of that. So in that video, which I'll link down in the description as well, in that video, we had to take the forks completely apart and rebuild them with the OEM spring and then the air ride pucks on top of that. On this one, we don't have any lowering kit on it, so this is going to be a pretty straightforward video. It's very, very important that you get a service manual for your motorcycle. If you're going to be doing any wrenching on your motorcycle at all, you should have a service manual anyway. You don't have to go out and buy a $150 service manual book. You can find the PDFs online for free just about anywhere. So getting started on this, I've already taken a lot of stuff off the bike. I've taken on the front of the bike. We're going to work our way from the front back to the back. We have air lines that have to go underneath the tank. I really highly advise not running wires and air lines between your motor and your tank, just flopping down in here and zip tied off. It's not a good idea. So let's get the camera over here and get started. Now the first thing we want to do when we're taking the front wheel off is go ahead and get the brake calipers off and get those out of the way. In order to get these two caliper bolts off right here, you've got a 12.10 millimeter socket. You see inside that socket right there, that is different than a regular socket. That is a 12-point socket. If you put a regular socket on here, you're going to strip these bolts out. All the tools that I'll be using today, everything that we're using, will be in the link in the description down below. So if you want to buy just this one, you can. But like I said before, if you're going to be wrenching on your bike at all, it's a good idea to go ahead and get some tools. Once we get those two bolts out, we're just going to pull our caliper back like this. We're going to get some unauthorized Harley-Davidson caliper holder bag thingies, and we're going to slide our calipers into those. Basically, you just want to keep it away from banging into the wheel and the fender. So we're going to do the same thing to the other side. Take that last bolt out and make sure that you got a hold of that caliper. You don't want that slipping down and banging into your fender or your wheel. I'm going to pull that out. We're going to take our second unauthorized Harley-Davidson caliper holder bag thingy. We're going to slide the caliper in there. Drawstring that thing up. Now, I don't know what size bolt you have. Ours is a 7/16 nut and a 6 millimeter hex. So just get your fender bolts off, get your fender out of the way. Now hold your fender bolt. Now you've got spacers in here, so this part comes a little tricky if you're trying to do this by yourself. Gonna hold that fender up so we can get the other side up. Get that spacer out. Now our fender is unmounted. We should be able to roll this guy forward and off the bike. Now our bike has a flush axle on it, so it's going to be a little bit different than your stocker OEM. Your stocker OEM, when you're going to have a nut on one side, and you're going to, this side over here, you're going to have this disc with, this side over here, you're going to have this barrel sticking out with like a hole in it. You can take a thick screwdriver, stick through that hole to help hold that and break the nut loose, get that off, and then pop the axle out. Ours, we have to get this beauty cap off here, which I'm going to just pry off with this small screwdriver. Just held on there with a little rubber ring. We'll set that out of the way, and then we have our axle bolt right here. Now the first thing we want to do is take out this pinch bolt right here. This pinch bolt pinches this. If you have a 13 and older, you're going to have 2 bolts that go up through this way, and this piece here will be separate from your fork. On the 14 and up, this is built into the fork. So we want to get this out, get our pinch bolt completely out. Now we have this loose. Gonna run this out. Yeah, just dropped right there. So now I'm gonna let the bike down to where this tire is just barely touching the ground. And now you can see it's pretty loose right there. So that means that axle is, you know, the weight of the bike is on the jack, and we should be able to get this axle out. Once you have the weight distributed right and you can see that this is loose, you can just grab your axle, gonna move the wheel around a little bit, and we're gonna pull that out. Now our spacers are still in there. Your spacers may have fell out, but you can roll that forward and take your spacers off. These are cone spacers on a non-ABS from Harley Davidson. If you have ABS or you just have the stock spacers, they're gonna just be like a round aluminum barrel. They'll have 2 lines on them. Pay very attention to which way those lines were. If you have to take pictures of it, take pictures of it. And when you put this back together, those spacers have to go in there a certain way. Now once we have the wheel off, we can roll this guy forward and sneak it on out. The next thing we're gonna do is pull our tank. Now I have chrome neck covers that come with these different bolts right here. If you have a stock one, this is gonna be a Torx head bolt on both sides. You may have a little rubber black plastic cap that goes over this. You just simply pop that off and you'll gain access to those torque bolts. You're gonna remove this bolt on both sides of the bike, and then you come to the back of the tank back here. Right here you've got another one and another one right here. So you got these 2 and those 2. Now we have a few wires that we need to disconnect. You follow this line from underneath your dash, goes your fuel pump, back here to this gray plug. You're gonna disconnect that one. You've got 1 other plastic line or 2. If you have a stock dash, you're gonna have 2 of these plastic lines, these overflow lines, 1 on each side. You can disconnect these right here. The other one is gonna come back and run down alongside your bike. Just pull it up, out, and take it with the tank. This one, however, disconnects right there. It's just an overflow line. You want to grab an old rag or a paper towel or something, because you are going to drop just a dab of gas out of this. This silver piece right here, this pushes up, this disconnects, this black piece pulls down. So at the same time that you're pushing up on this, grab the back of the hose and pull down on that. And this can be stiff, it may spin, but it won't push. So sometimes you just got to kind of jack with it a little bit. You can see mine's popped already. So I'm going to go ahead and get my towel under there, just like that. You see that little dab of gas that we dropped. So we caught that. If you're not quite sure if you got everything disconnected, do not pick up this tank and just start walking off with it. Pick up the tank, kind of pull it, push it, move it around, make sure you're not hung up on anything, and then pull it off. Now we have to get this switch housing panel off. You've got a screw here, same screw on the other side. We're gonna go ahead and pull those 2 screws. Now that we have both screws out, we're just gonna simply pull out on the bottom of this. Now this is just clipped in at the top right here with these. But these fake switches, unless you have switches, if you do have switches, you definitely will be plugged in. But these fake switches are also plugged in. So you kind of have to reach up in here and unplug one of these. Just do it by hand. Just kind of feel it, squeeze it, unplug it. We'll go to the other side and we can take that panel off. Now what that's done for us is gives us access to this top pinch bolt. You can see the top of our fork coming out right here. You've got a pinch bolt here, and you've got 2 pinch bolts right down here. Once we loosen those forks will slide out. So I'm gonna loosen the bottom 2, but leave that top one on there. Don't have to take them out. They're pinch bolts, so you just have to loosen them. Now when you're doing the top one, go to the side of the bike and grab the fork. You don't want to loosen that and this thing just comes slamming out. Just slide that straight down. We're going to do the same thing on this side. Well, once we get that, we can kind of pull, twist. Now we brought our fork leg over to our unofficial Harley-Davidson janky ass fork holder. This is homemade, but trust me guys, this thing works. So inside your fork leg right here is a ginormous spring. That spring right now is pushing on the bottom of this cap. So pay very close attention to this part right here. This thing is under pressure. So you may have to take a small impact to bust this thing loose, right? So we put it in the fork holder, we squeeze this down so this doesn't move. Take a small impact like this, give it a couple of hits, it usually busts loose. Once it busts loose, I'll take something like this T-handle or something, and so I can get my hand over this thing, right? And unscrew it. And when it pops, you want to have your whole hand over that, holding that. It will pop up. Right there, that's moving. If you don't have one of these, you can use a ratchet, whatever. I just use this so I can stay kind of center over the top of it and turn. I'm gonna have my hand and I'm kind of pushing down at the same time. Yeah, there she goes. Now we have the top cap off and you're gonna see this guy here. This is what pushed up. This is your preload spacer. We're gonna take this out. You want this completely out. I am gonna show you what's down inside here though. If I push up on the lower leg, do it slow, but you're gonna have a washer down there. All right, and then you'll have this coil spring. Now inside this package from Dirty is front fork air piston installation. This tells you how to put these in, but I'm gonna show you. But inside here, like I said, you've got the two pucks, and then you have a long bolt like this. This is a removal bolt. So this, if you ever have to take these pucks out, you're gonna have to have this. It also comes with this little thin piece of plastic that you wrap around the O-rings when you slide this in. That keeps the threads, these sharp threads from that cap, keeps those threads from chewing into that O-ring or flipping that O-ring up when you're putting the pucks in. Depending on the year of your bike or how long your fork fluid's been in there. This fork fluid is heavy fork fluid that we put in, and it's not been in there that long. So our fork fluid is really good. So I don't want to dump this out just to show you how to pour some back in. If it's black but it's like milky looking, you're gonna want to go ahead and dump that out and put in new fork fluid. With this top cap off, you can just flip this over, pour it out, pump it, and to make sure you got all the oil out. But since we're not tearing ours apart and our fork oil is good, all we need to do is just remove this preload spacer basically. And on the cap itself, we're gonna want to get that rubber O-ring off to put on our new cap. The new caps do not come with rubber O-rings, so if you want to pick up two of those rubber O-rings, you can do that as well. If I get this puck up into focus here, you can see on one end it has a hole for that bolt. You got a rubber washer that goes around the middle, and you can see it's kind of concaved. It's smooth down here at the bottom. It's got a lip on top. Make sure that that bolt hole side is up. Just drops in just like this, all right? Another quick tip too, go ahead and get some of that fork oil on your finger and just lube up this puck a little bit. Doesn't need a whole lot. We're gonna take our piece of plastic that they've supplied. We're gonna wrap it around. We're gonna set this in here, make sure the plastic is all the way in. We just wanna give it a slight twist and push. We're gonna hang on to the plastic sleeve, and we're gonna just like push that piston past those grooves. And that's where this bolt can come in handy too. You can screw this bolt in and help you turn it and kind of wiggle it past those threads in there. You just kind of wiggle it, push it, and now you're in. Now you can take that plastic off there. We can work this up and down to make sure that that piston is moving freely. Once we know that the piston is moving freely, we're going to take our O-ring, just use a little pick like this to get underneath that O-ring. Set that off to the side. We're going to put that on our new cap. Now, because we don't have that preload spacer and that spring pushing up, we don't have to worry about the pressure. So we're just going to make sure we have our rubber O-ring on our new cap. We're just going to hand start this. Now once we have this on, we're going to tighten this to 16 to 19 foot-pounds. It's not a lot. Okay, so I lost audio in here, so I got to do a little dub over, but inside your hardware package, you're going to have two fittings for the top of the fork caps. You're going to have a straight one like this and a 90-degree like this. Now on the Street Glide, you can technically use either one of these. Now because this fitting is recessed down into the fork cap, you have to use a open-sided socket, which we don't have, or you can buy an adapter from like Lowe's, a little 1/2 inch or 1 inch adapter that raises this 90 up out of the fork cap, but still stays below your bars. So what we're gonna do is just use the straight one so we can put a socket on it and get that torque down. Now once we get this in, we're gonna tighten this down. There's really no torque spec for this listed anywhere that I could find. We just tighten it down snug. It's got the thread sealant already on there. Just wanna get it snug so we can make sure it doesn't leak. And that fork is ready to put back on the bike. So what we have to do is repeat that process on the other fork, and then we'll get back over there and get them put back on the bike. How to measure for bump stops. These are bump stops. They're designed to limit the travel of the front end of your bike. Now this 14 Street Glide has a 21-inch front wheel with a wrap front fender, but we're adding the Air Ride, and I want to limit that travel on there to make sure that I don't smack my crash bar, I don't smack my chin spoiler, and specifically when I air all the way out in the front and rear and set it on a center stand, I have those stops in there to limit that travel so that fender doesn't come up and come into contact with this bottom piece underneath your outer fairing. So it's better to take the time to do it now and do it right than to think that you have it right, and the first time that you air out or hit a big hole, you smack that front fender, guess what? You're back over to paint. And this is when the bump stops are gonna go on. In order for me to measure the bump stops and be able to see the bump stops, I have to remove one of my fork cans. In order to do that, right inside here, you're gonna have two bolts, one here and one on top. They're right near the lower pinch bolts for your fork. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and get in here and remove those two bolts. So we're just gonna pull these two bolts out. We're gonna pull that fork can out and get it out of the way. So what I've done after I got both forks mounted back in the bike, I just tightened them down. I remounted my front fender. Once you get the front fender remounted, come around here to the front, push up on both of your forks until they bottom out, until it stops. I can't get that up any higher. Now you can see the reason for taking off the fork can. If I had the fork can on here, you would not be able to see this distance right here. You can see this black right here, the bottom of your triple tree, and the top of your fork. So we're gonna measure that, right? Should have about 1.5 inches. We're right at 1.5 inches. My fender is probably, I don't know, 1/2 inch away from the bottom of this fairing spoiler here. Now these bump stops are 1/4 inch thick. You want to stack up at a minimum 1.5 inches. So I'm going to pull this back off, put some bump stops in, and then we'll go from there. Now you'll see in the bump stock bag, you're going to have a bunch of these that are just loose like this. And then you're going to have 4 like this that are zip tied together. These are actually smaller than the other ones. So these are the same thickness, but they go on the very top. So they would be the last ones that you would add onto your fork. What that's for is the fork cam bolts, right? Now, this is gonna be up inside the fork cam, but just for illustration, I'm gonna put it on top so you can see it. You can see the fork cam bolts, right? If we put that big one on there, it hits the fork cam bolt. So it's never going to allow that to lay down flat. So that's what the little ones are for. So we know from our measurement a while ago that we're 1.5 inches fully bottomed out. So we have to automatically fill 1.5 inches. Putting on these rings up to 1.5 inches don't really do anything. It's still going to allow it to bottom out. What we have to determine after that is where we want to stop it, right? We know our 2 small ones have to go on. That's 1/2 inch, right? So these are 1/4 inch thick. So that's 1 inch. 4 and 2 is going to be pretty much on there, but not doing anything. Anything after that will give you your distance. So for me, just to be on the safe side, I'm going to add 3/4 inch. I want a little bit more distance between my chin spoiler and that fender, and also the top of my fender and the bottom of that lower fairing piece. So we've got our 2 small ones, we've got our 1 inch, and we're gonna add 3/4 inch, 3 rings right there. That gives us 9 total rings. The last 2 will be our small ones. Those go on. So that is how you add bump stops. So I still do want to test it. So we're leaving the fork can off. We're gonna just do one fork because putting the fender on is gonna push both forks up equally, right? So they're both gonna bottom out at the same time. It doesn't matter. The bump stops are gonna stop both sides. So we're going to leave our fork can off, put this back together, remount our front fender, shove it up, and we'll see where we're at. We're gonna slide our bump stops up to where they hit and bottom out because it's really hard. You got the weight of the bike on it, that'll go right up. But with just us pushing on it, it's a little different. So we're gonna slide these up. We're gonna come around here. And we're gonna push this up like we did a while ago. Now, we've hit right there. Make sure it's all the way up to the bottom of the triple tree up here. And that right there is where it'll stop. With no spacers, bottomed out was 1.5 inches. So now you can see it a little bit better. That first 1.5 inches does nothing. We add that 1.5 inches, it's still gonna go up to the bottom. It's where it bottoms out at. So the other 3 that we added is just a little too much. So what I'm gonna do, since I gotta put my cam back on anyways, I'm gonna pull all this stuff off, take the fender off, take the forks back out, remove one of the rings, do the equal amount of rings on the other side, jam it up in there, make sure that it's hitting the bottom of the triple tree, and then we'll measure again. So we're gonna roll with 8 bump stops on each side. We've got our forks back in, our cam put back on, and now we're gonna torque these pinch bolts. These 3 pinch bolts are 18 to 24 foot-pounds, but you wanna do it twice. You have to repeat the process. So 18 to 24 up here, 18 to 24 on those 2 down there, and then do it again. Gonna get our wheel back on. Gonna get our axle, wipe that thing off, add some new anti-seize, axle grease, whatever you want to use. We use anti-seize on these. Just keeps everything lubed. Got our spacer. Put that in, slide our spacer in. Try to get this lined up a little bit. Looks like we need to come down just a tad on the front end. Get our wheel straight. That's on. From this bolt, 70 to 75 foot-pounds. Put our pinch bolt back in, run it down, torque it 18 to 22 foot-pounds. Gonna get our brake caliper, get it back into place. If you have an ABS bike, don't forget to put your ABS sensor back in here where it came off of. These front caliper bolts are 28 to 38 foot-pounds. Your front fender bolts are 16 to 20 foot-pounds. Now remember, this is bike or kind of year specific, bike and year specific, I should say. Like I said in the beginning of the video, don't just go by my torque specs unless you're working on a 14, 15, or a 16. We want to get our air lines from both of these front forks over to the middle here somewhere. We have a T that we're going to put in here. It's a push to connect T. We're going to come down here. We're going to go into this black plastic tray that's underneath your tank to the back of the bike. Once we get that back there, we're just going to let it hang and just set it out of the way until we get everything else done on the other side. So when you're running your airline, there's not very much room in between the straight fitting and the bottom of your handlebars. So the biggest thing is with this is getting the line in, the airline in, and not bending it so hard that it crimps or that it's on the verge of crimping. So what I'm gonna do is just kind of mess with my airline a little bit so I can get the straightest coming off of this over the handlebars and come back down in a circle, big looping circle, and down here to my T. So I zoomed in here to show you what I did. I just fed this over the handlebar, and it's hard to get my fingers in there, so I just use a pair of needle nose. You just want to make sure that that's pushed in all the way, and you're not squeezing the airline with this. You're just kind of grabbing it and pushing it in. It goes in pretty easy, but just don't crimp your airline. I'm gonna come down here underneath my ignition for my T. So basically I'm gonna take this line to the other side, or I can just cut it right here and start over and come to my T. So I've got enough room in here for this to set. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut this here. Inside your hardware kit that you had the little 90s and the straights for the top of your fork caps, you're also gonna have a T in there, just like that. So we're gonna plug our T in here. Now we got this big loop that's gonna hopefully not crimp. So we gotta take our airline over the handlebars and get it behind all the other wires. Get it to where we can see it. I'm gonna reach in there, grab it. Now we've came over the handlebars, so out of the forks, because we use the straight fittings. Now if I would have used the 90s, we could have came up and just came straight over and we don't have to worry about this bending. So that's what's nice about the 90s. So the biggest thing with this is making sure that you have enough slack in here, because this line is going to be kind of pinched down into this and this isn't going to move. So the slack has to be up here for when you turn full right or full left. We're going to run our new airline right down this tray and put this back on. Now if you see right down here in the front, it's got a lip. So I either want to run that airline through this side piece, or if I want it more centered, I can go ahead and just take a X-Acto knife or something and just notch this plastic out. And just to kind of hold it in place, I'm going to put a few zip ties around the airline and just a couple of these wires in here, just to kind of hold it where I want it to stay. The other side of this has the same lip on it, so we're going to cut that out as well. Make sure that those holes line up so you're not pinching your airline. Go ahead and snap our cap back on. Now right here on top, you got a few bolts right here. You got one here and one here. It's going to be a Torx bit. Remove those. This holds our battery cover on. On top of the battery cover, you got a black plug here for your brakes in the back. You're just going to pop that off. It's a little Christmas tree thing here. You got the gray one, the one that went up to the tank. You're going to get it out of the way. Both sides of the ECM, you got a little clip that you're just going to push over with your thumb, and that comes up out of the way. We're going to move that, and then we get the battery tray off. We push this forward and up. So we slide this thing forward and we lift it up, and that's out of the way. So the next thing we're going to do is build our pressure switch. This is the pressure switch for the front, and you can see the pressure switch for the rear is already on the tank. So we need to remove the tank, cut a few zip ties, get this tank down here where we can work with it and get these butted together. This switch here has to come off the bottom. So we're going to loosen this, get this off. This wire is going to twist some as you're taking it off, which I don't really particularly care for, but that's how it comes off. So we just want to keep rolling the wires around as we pull this off. Hopefully, here in a second, we're going to have that off. There we go. So I'm going to leave it twisted a little bit, because when I put it back on, it's got to twist back on. So I've got plenty of slack up here. So I'm going to pull that yellow wire down, because this now has to mount to this bottom one, right? And then inside that hardware kit, we had 4 bags with stuff in it. Now all of this is to mount this new front switch and butt it and marry it to this one, but also bolt it to the frame. Now once you take this pressure switch out of here, go ahead and clean up that area. If there's any debris or anything like that, get that cleaned out. We're going to take our new manifold, and we're going to grab 2 of these O-rings that have oil on them. The oil is there to kind of help hold them in place. We're going to set them on there. Those rubber O-rings are what's going to marry these 2 manifolds together. We're going to take this bolt, this long bolt that's in the pack, we're going to run it through the top, run it through both of them, put the nut on the bottom. That's going to hold everything in place until we get the 4 screws to mount it to the frame itself. We're going to run this bolt in. We're going to take our Allen wrench and a wrench. Now we have those tight. And those 2 manifolds are now married together. But we still have 4 bolts and washers that go in this way and hold that manifold to the frame. That long bolt and nut are just there to keep it together so those O-rings don't slip until you get these in. Now that we have it mounted to the frame, you can take that bolt out. Now we're going to take our new 90. You see that 90 that comes out here and goes up to the rear. We're going to put a new 90 on the side of this one here that goes to the front. Now in the same bag that that 90 was in, you're going to have a little plug like this. And by the way, these do have O-rings on them, so you don't have to put any thread locker on these. The 90 that goes in the side, we're going to flip it over. On the back side, you've got a hole on the back side that you want to go ahead and put that one in. Just going to get that one in snug. Now we have to deal with this guy. I'm going to put some new thread sealer on this. The switch that we took out of the bottom. I'll twist this up a little bit because we know we have to untwist it to get it back in. Now our manifold set, we can mount this back to the bike. Inside the kit, you're also going to have this little bag like this, and it's got a dirty air safety valve in it. We already have a safety switch mounted down here on the firewall. This bag of hardware here just puts both front and rear into the same line. So the first thing we're going to do is take our double switch here and a 90, and we're going to mount that to the side. So the safety valve switch, like I said, is mounted on my firewall. Now wherever you have that mounted, you're going to want to get to that, follow that line back here. We're going to unplug this one, going into our T. We're going to plug that into our new 90 that we just put on. It's like that, and if you need to cut some hose off, you can. I've got plenty of room in here. You're going to take a little bit off the end of your line, your spool of line that you have. You just need a little bit. So now we have the line coming in from our safety switch on the firewall to the side of this double valve. We're going to take our air line from the front shocks, bring it down here. We're going to cut this off underneath the side cover area. Make sure you leave yourself plenty of slack. You're going to grab a T and you're going to put that into a T like that. You're going to grab a small piece. You're going to come off of that T. And you're going to come down here to the first valve. You're going to come off of that T, come down to the first valve, like that. Now, where we unplugged the line a while ago, where this line was coming into here, we're going to take another small piece. We're going to go into that. We're going to come down to that valve. Just like that. That leaves you with one line we're going to put right here. We're going to run this back and plug it into the manifold that we just mounted to the tank. So that tank is going to air up that front line. See, that's a straight shot to that front line. Down here, it's going to dump that front line for the switch. Back here, you've got a line coming in that fills up the rear. These two go to the rear, and a line that comes down to the switch to dump the valve for the rear. When you're pulling your air line, no matter where you're pulling it from, because it is wound up like this, pull it nice and slow. Because if you get something like that and it hangs up and you pull harder, you're going to crimp that line. Remember the rubber grommet I was telling you about? We're going to go through that. We're going to come down here and we're going to plug into that bottom line. From there, we're going to take all of our line. We're going to pull it up and zip tie where we cut the first zip ties off. We're going to zip tie the lines and the wires together alongside the frame right here. Now on that new manifold we just put on, we got 4 wires. We got an orange, red, and 2 blacks. We're going to pull those up as well. Pull them through here and get them up here under your battery compartment. You're going to want to pull those up and zip tie them off along with your air lines. But because there are 4 wires that are just exposed, I like to take Tessa tape like this. I'll put a link down in the description of this. You can get this on Amazon really cheap. It goes a really long way. But we're going to Tessa tape. It's like a cloth tape used by automotive manufacturers. We're going to wrap this up and just keep these lines protected. Now coming off our rear manifold, we had the 2 black grounds and we had a red and an orange. This is basically just going to be up and down. The 2 black grounds I've ran to the other side of the bike where I have all of my grounds, and I've grounded them over there in the frame. Now if you're going to be hooking up this switch from Dirty Air, maybe you're putting it on your firewall, whatever you're doing, you're gonna have a red and orange and a blue. Your red and your orange are gonna match the red and the orange. You're just gonna solder those together. That's gonna leave the blue wire. That blue wire is gonna go down to an accessory key on switch. If you already have your rear air on and you've got that hooked up, go ahead and take your blue wire and run it over to wherever you've got your key on accessory wire now. On 2014 up, on the left side of the bike underneath the side cover by your fuse panel, you're gonna see a harness coming through there with a red and a yellow wire. Now this is 14 and up. That red with yellow stripe wire is a key on power wire. Now since we have switches from AF Customs, we don't have a red and an orange, we've got a black and a purple. And the black on that switch is not ground. One is up and one is down. So basically, we want to take this red and orange, we want to splice these, we just kind of twist them together. We're going to hit our switch, see which one's up and which one's down. If it's reversed, we're just going to reverse the wires. So now we got our front switch hooked up, got everything soldered, double check to make sure up was up and down was down. It's very simple. If you're wanting, like I said, if you're wanting to use the switches that Dirty provide, you can mount those just about anywhere you can find a place to mount them. One of the most common places to mount them is down here on the firewall. So from here, I'm going to cut the camera. I'm going to go over everything. One other thing you want to do too is go ahead and air up the system. Get yourself a bottle of soap water and go ahead and start spraying everything that you put on the bike. Spray all your fittings, spray everything on the tank, everything on the compressor. Make sure that you don't have any leaks. If you see some bubbles from that soap water, take a second, tighten that stuff up. Other than that, we're just going to put the bike back together. We're going to check our front end to make sure we got enough slack up there in the air line for full right and full left turn. And then that's pretty much it. So I'm going to cut the camera here and get all this stuff buttoned up and we'll see what it looks like. So to speed this video up a little bit, I already dropped the lift and put the tank back on. We got all this stuff goes back together the same way you took it apart. You're going to have 2 bolts down here. You've got 2 bolts up here. To reconnect the fuel line, you're simply going to push up on that chrome piece and you're going to reconnect it. Just going to push it in there and drop that down and make sure that it's connected. Now from here, I'm going to cut the camera, go ahead and get the rest of the bike put together. We'll wheel it outside and we'll see what the air ride looks like. That is the Dirtyworks Dirty Air Front Air Ride add-on on the Street Glide models. Remember, at the end of this video, there will be some videos that pop up that you can watch. And on that, I'll put the Road Glide Front Air Ride, and then I'll also put the just rear air ride on the Road Glide. Now, between the Road Glide and the Street Glide on the rear, there's absolutely no different. It's just on the front. And really, the only difference is how to access those forks. So, pretty easy install. And remember, I'll put all of the tools and their respective links down in the description. If you're on your phone, you may have to click more and open that up and read down in there. There'll be links to all of the tools and all the stuff that we used here today, even a link straight over to Dirty Air where you can pick up these kits. I'm gonna get out of here and get myself back to work. I hope to see you in the next video, but until then, as always, be safe. Keep your knees in the breeze. Thanks for checking out the video. Don't forget to hit that like and that subscribe popping up over here. And don't forget to check out the rest of the channel because we have a ton of bagger related and soft tail videos on our channel. And to get you started, maybe you can check out this one or this one. I'm not really gonna say anything else. You can just click one of those and take it over to another video.